I am Vero, and you're watching Modern Immigrant. Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Modern Immigrant. And as always, I'm really happy that you're here. And every Monday, we have new episodes. Some Mondays are going to be in English, and other Mondays is going to be in Spanish. Today, you're about to meet Rasheed. Rasheed is a licensed mental health therapist professional that is also a Nigerian American, and so he relates to the first generation immigrant experience and struggles, and he's also the founder of one of my favorite accounts that's called Progressive Migrants, where he shares and raises awareness in terms of mental health, wellness, and well-being. I'm really excited that you're going to hear not only his story, but also a lot of resources and tips that he's going to give you throughout the interview. We talk about the acculturation process, we talk about healthy and unhealthy coping skills, and how we can transform those unhealthy coping skills. And so I'm really excited. I hope you enjoyed this interview. Remember that in the description of this episode, you can find all the links to connect with Rasheed and also to connect with us at Modern Immigrant. Don't forget to check our website, modernimmigrant.net, and also our Instagram at Modern Immigrant, where you can find a little bit more information about the guests, about the things that we're doing, our shop, about our book club, and so much more. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're listening, really subscribing. It's really, really important. So thank you for being here and enjoy. For donations and supporting the podcast, you can buy us coffee at buymeacoffee.com/modernimmigrant. Thank you. And today I am so excited to be able to introduce Rasheed to everyone and to be able to have this conversation. I don't know how many times I have been saying this, but I'm really grateful for Instagram because when I first started this podcast, I had no idea how I was going to be finding and connected with other immigrants. I had the desire to do this, but I was just interviewing my friends at the beginning and my family. And then this amazing community started to grow, and I'm really happy that I'm able to see more and more immigrants creating content for other immigrants. So Rasheed, I'm excited that you're here. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Vero. It's great to be here. And I'm really glad to be able to connect with a lot of fellow immigrants as well. And when I first started my account, the Progressive Migrants page, that was also another concern that I had was, I felt like I would have been doing something that a lot of other people were not doing. And I was pleasantly surprised to have found out that, there was, a small community of other content creators that were creating content specifically for immigrants. So
Yeah.
I was very excited to discover that.
It's a positive surprise, and we are going to be talking about progressive migrants progressive migrant, I'm sorry. Because I think that, as you were saying, I don't know if that was my experience as an immigrant, but I didn't have those accounts or that community when I first moved to the US. And
Yeah.
yes, you're right, they're starting to kind of grow, but we still need so many more spaces and platforms where we can talk about immigration. So I'm excited to hear about your immigration journey. A lot of the times, or every time, we start these interviews by asking, what's your relationship with immigration? What's your story? If it's yourself or your family, we would love to hear it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you for that question. So, my experience with immigration is one that is probably common for a lot of other people. So, I was born in Nigeria, and my entire family, we live in Nigeria. And when I was about 11 years old, my family immigrated to the US, and we had the opportunity to be able to immigrate into the US through the visa lottery opportunity. So there was a visa lottery that is being offered to the country Nigeria at the time. And it wasn't just Nigeria, this is like a global thing that the US kind of offers. And Nigeria at the time was still qualified, but Nigeria is no longer qualified for the visa lottery. So, but at the time, my family, I think my name had gotten selected, and so and that was our opportunity to leave the country. And of course, my parents saw it as an opportunity to, to sort of provide us with a better future, a brighter future. And so they went ahead and took the opportunity, and you know, almost 20 years down the line, and there we are.
Wow, you're like, I think like the second person I know, and the first one in the podcast that have won that lottery. I know it was a thing that a lot of people also try to do back in Venezuela, because we were also at some point we did qualify and then we didn't, and I think that lottery kind of ended a few years ago. I don't know if it's still a thing, uh, but I can't imagine how it was for Rasheed at what 11 years old to arrive to the US. How was that experience of moving, and where did you arrive in the US?
Yeah, so it was. I always feel like that was a very critical age for me. And we arrived in New York. So I have an uncle who's a lawyer in New York, and he was the sort of our support at the time, and so he was the main person that really was very instrumental in us being able to sort of go through the entire process. And so he was very hands-on, and he took us in, and myself and my family, we stayed with them for several months before we eventually transitioned from New York to Indiana, the Midwest. And again, that was all from his own planning and doing. He had lived in Indiana for several years, and so he had a lot of connections here, and so he was just like, I can get you guys situated in Indiana, and Indiana is like so much more slow paced than New York. New York was very fast paced, and it still is very fast paced. And so my parents came here with four children, and they were not ready for what New York was gonna what New York was gonna give them. So
That
my uncle had gotten us connected with housing and everything else out here in Indiana. So we went ahead and hopped on a Greyhound bus, and off we went to Indiana. So
That's an amazing journey. And yeah, I can't imagine, right? Like so many things that you were experiencing and changes. And I would love to hear so the audience can have a little bit of an idea. What were some of those, I don't know, changes, cultural shocks, I don't know how to call it, that you experienced from, living in Nigeria and then moving to Indiana, especially because it sounded like that's where you settle.
yeah, yeah. It was quite a transition. I think the biggest shock for me was, so growing up in Nigeria, I lived around a I I would say a small community. It felt like a small community. It's actually a pretty big community, but it felt small because everybody knew everybody, and we grew up with cousins, and we all throughout our education, we were always around family. We had tons of cousins around. We had neighbors that were sort of like cousins because our parents were really good friends, and so um, that was how I experienced the first 11 years of my life. But then when we transitioned into the US, that completely, changed. Where, my parents, they didn't know the community that we were now in, whether in New York or Indiana. Like um, they didn't have knowledge of what the community members were like. They didn't have any understanding of what the community had to offer, and it was very much like a very sheltered um, few years of my life when we first transitioned into the U.S. So that was probably the first biggest shocker was, being a kid that was very carefree, and your parents, they allowed you to sort of do your own thing and explore and discover and experience, life as a kid, to coming into a community now where Your parents were very guarded. They didn't know who to trust. Um,
Yeah.
they didn't know any of the neighbors. And so you came home from school and then you went into the house and you did not come out until it was time to go to school the next morning. And
Wow.
that was very unusual for me.
Mhm.
Uh, in Nigeria, I was used to, you come home from school, you took off your backpack and you go run around and play with your cousins, you play
Yeah.
soccer. That was like the big thing. And you just go anywhere in the neighborhood, go to the next neighborhood, have fun, be a kid. And that was probably the biggest like change for me at first. But yeah, that was one of the ones that kind of like took me by surprise.
That is hard, yeah, because I'm sure that as a parent, as a migrant parent to arrive to a new country, it can be scary, right? Like not knowing
Yes.
how things work. And at least in my culture, we hear a lot this thing about, if you move to the US when you're a teenager, there's all the things that teenagers do in the US that we don't. I mean, I'm quoting because I'm sure we do other stuff, but it's like that fear of the unknown, right? Like, there's things that we don't know how they work over there, so you better, stay home, as
Yeah.
exactly as you're saying.
Yeah,
So
it's better to be safe. And like you just and that was I think that was one of the most instrumental things about like my childhood was the fact that like that was a really big adjustment for my parents and myself. It really was like being raised like it was a 360 from or a 180 rather from what I was used to. Like my parents were very free and very much allowed us to explore in Nigeria, but whereas like where we are now, like you're saying, like my parents they just didn't know they didn't know the community well enough. They didn't feel like they were a part of the community well enough. They didn't, so it was really more of like a very cautious lifestyle that they had to now live, and so um, they were very much like fearful, and they try to be like super cautious with us, and they were always trying to protect us from not getting too like we yeah not getting too mixed in, because again, like
yeah,
they didn't know the neighbors. They didn't know like they don't even know who to reach out to if they ever needed like urgent help. They didn't know all of that stuff. They
right.
didn't know the community well enough
Mm.
to feel safe in it and to explore the neighborhood. It was pretty much, and it wasn't just for us, it was even for them, because they just went to work and came home too,
Right.
because they didn't know. They didn't have friends in the neighborhood. They didn't have none of that. So they too were living a very sheltered life just as much as their children were.
Right, right.
So,
And did you ever feel like at some point that changed, or it was able to get a little more flexible, or yeah, over time, or you were able to also start to find a different way, right, of living?
yeah, like I think there are moments where things would like if my parents would develop somewhat of a good friendship with
Mm.
maybe a neighbor. And I remember there was a particular neighbor right when I was around maybe like I want to say 12, 13. Like there was a neighbor that we had, and my parents had a pretty decent relationship with them, and they were grown to kind of trust the neighbor. And I think they were a little more lax in allowing us to kind of go over there and hang out with them. But even still, you could still tell that they're still trying to be cautious, and they're still trying to make sure that they were looking out, and that they weren't too relaxed. I
That-
think I think generally with and with African immigrants, I think generally there's this like caution that they sort of have, like this innate distrust for like, okay, I don't know this neighbor, I don't know this person, and so they're very cautious in their approach. And
yeah,
um,
that
but
makes
like I
sense.
said, I think over the years, I think it did get a little bit better in terms of like them. The more comfortable they got in the community, I
Yeah.
think the more they kind of relaxed. But I think overall, it was never till this day.
Mm.
And like I said, my family's going on 20 years in the U.S. and till this day, I still don't think my parents has ever. I've never seen them as comfortable as they were in Nigeria. And my family had done two trips back to Nigeria,
Mhm.
and it's really crazy to kind of see the change
Mm.
because even now when they go to Nigeria and I see them, I'm like, this is a completely different side of them. Like
Wow.
they're so trusting of their environment, their community, and it's like this is not how you are in the U.S. Like you're so much more timid and so much more housebound, but like
Yeah.
in their home country, they're just so free and they're so trusting of yeah, everyone.
Yeah. Wow. That is just so interesting and so amazing. And I'm sure a lot of immigrants that are listening that are first generation or the parents moved to the US or to another country can relate to that, to
Yeah.
seeing that difference in their behavior and how that behavior can also have an impact in your life as well, right? And in the connections that you make and in staying something that I think it's really important and we talk about in the podcast is how important it is to open up to other cultures or immigrants. And sometimes as immigrants we tend to stay within our culture, right? Like meeting other immigrants that in my case are also from Latin America or also from Venezuela. So I wonder if for you, now that we're talking about this experience, like if for you was similar in staying connected with other African immigrants, or if for you and your family, or if you were able to open up to say, okay, now we live in the US, we have to also kind of, yeah,
Open
go
up
on
and blend
a
in.
typical for sure.
And the interesting thing about it is, I think it's a very subconscious thing. I don't think it's something that they're like openly like, oh, I'm scared. They would never say that. They would never. I don't think it's something that like they're very conscious of, like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't trust this person.
Exactly.
That's why I'm a little timid, or that's why I'm a little more reserved.
Mm.
But I know that now, and I know that that's what it was, and that's what it still is. But I don't think it's something that they're like openly conscious of, like, oh, I don't, but it's written all over their actions and the things that they say and things like that. But yeah.
How did your immigration impacted your decision to open the space that you have right now in social media to support other immigrants? Like what happened that you felt like, okay, we need to address this? And I know you also use your profession to do it. So yeah, how do you think that all kind of clicked?
I think it really is a beautiful thing. I think it all came together so nicely. Like, but I think my career choice really was profoundly impacted by my immigration experience and my um, acculturation process. I
Yeah.
think that process was something that had a huge impact on me.
Can you
Uh,
tell us what you do for work?
so I am a therapist. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and a licensed clinical mental health counselor. And I feel like when I was right around maybe 15, 16, just kind of up until that point, the acculturation process and the immigration process has really like breeded like this very um, introverted, very slow to speak,
Mm.
but very cognitively, I was very fast. Like I processed things. I was very observant. I was very what's the word I'm looking for? Um, I was always processing and I was always reading situation and reading people. And that was something that was kind of brought out of me. I think I've always had it in me, even prior to immigration, but I think it was heightened during the acculturation process because I had to learn my environment. I got really good at being able to learn my environment, being able to learn other people. And so um, throughout the whole cultivation process, like, you're always trying to find a way for you to blend in. You're always trying to find a way for you to, have the easiest transition, for you to integrate in such an easy way. And so you're very conscious of how other people speak around you. You're very conscious of their mannerism. And so I was mastering that, like, you
Mm,
know, and so by the time I got to like maybe 15, 16, I just realized that I really like being able to like connect with other people, because that was something that I was seeking so desperately throughout my acculturation process.
right.
And I realized that my relationship with other people was something that I valued very much. And um, when I was right around 16, I just remember thinking to myself, I think I'd seen a couple episodes of Dr. Phil, and maybe a couple other like television hosts, and I just always felt to myself like I could do that. Like,
Yeah.
I can't believe this is an actual profession. Like, this
Yeah.
is something that I could easily do. Um, and so, it was. I think that was when the love was kind of birthed in me, and I had some really good psychology teachers when I was in high school, and I just remember just feeling like my psychology teachers were the most relatable, most practical teachers that I had, and it was just kind of like, if I could like be any of these teachers, like, who were my favorite teachers? I was very good at math, but there was a difference in like the person, like the teacher, the quality of the teachers, and my psychology teachers, they just always stood out. And I was like, I think this is what I want to do.
This is what I want.
Yeah. So,
How pretty that
um,
connection that you're saying that you were also seeking, right? Like feeling that you belong,
yes,
feeling that you can fit in,
yes,
and try to
yes.
help people to reach that as well.
Yeah. So for me, I think that was it. Like, that immigration process, that acculturation process was something that it really made me aware of like how much I value relationship with other people, and how I could use my people skills, because I got really good at people skills, and I realized that it was something that I could utilize to help address issues that I was facing.
Mm,
My longing to connect, but not having someone that really did connect like that. And I remember, I think I was in sixth grade, and the first time there was a substitute teacher at my school, and this was a predominantly Caucasian school, and the substitute teacher was Nigerian. And I remember how powerful it was to finally meet a Nigerian educator. And it was something that, like, it was so profound, because even my classmates, they were like, oh my God, there's another Nigerian. And they were excited for me. I was excited for me. And I was like, man, there's something about being able to connect with someone that gets you. And so for me, when I was also, kind of deciding my career path, I was like, how great would it be for like other immigrant children if
mm,
they could have a therapist or a school counselor or someone that they can speak to, that really gets their experience and really understands them. And another teacher that had a really profound impact was my English as a second language, my ENL teacher.
okay.
And um, she was there was a way in which she was able to connect that I really thought was special. And I thought, being able to be with someone in that point where they're trying to transition,
Mm,
and being able to make them feel important, to make them feel valued, to make them feel seen. Because in all of the classes, that E&L class was special, because it was like that was the place where I was seen, I was heard. She saw that my lack of, proficiency in English
right.
meant nothing, because in every other way I was thriving. And she would compliment the little things, like, "Oh my God, that was so smart of you. How did you know to do that?" And it was like it was great. It was finally being recognized for everything else that I'm good at, aside from the fact that my English did not sound perfect. That was it. That was the only thing that everyone else would notice
Yeah.
whenever you would go around other classmates or other classes. It was always about you and your lack of, or your deficiency in the American, pronunciation was going to be the first thing that they noticed. But in
Right.
the E&L class, that was the most irrelevant thing because
Mm.
that was what we all had in common. It
Wow.
wasn't a big deal. It was everything else, and she cultivated all these other things in me, and it was like this feels good. This is how the classroom should feel for
Right.
the average kid, the average immigrant kid.
It's so beautiful that you're talking about that because I feel every immigrant have felt, I hope they have felt that they have found one place. Maybe it's one friend, maybe it's one person they meet, maybe it's a classroom teacher that made them feel good about who they were, that made them feel welcome. Because really, when you're an immigrant, it's almost like everyone's pointing at you as the different one, and nobody wants to be. I mean, it takes
Yeah,
some time and being mature and a grown up
yeah.
to.
As a
Oh,
kid, being different is your
it
biggest
is.
fear. It's like,
Yes.
oh my God, I don't want to be different. Like,
It's a
how
big
can I blend in?
thing. Yes. So
Yeah, like it's a kid's worst nightmare to feel like, they're being, pointed out for something that,
yeah.
you know, other people are good at, and it's like you're the only one that's not good at this thing, and it's like, you don't want that to be your identifier, like that kid that can't speak English, or that kid from El Salvador, that kid from Nigeria, that you don't want that to be your identity. And
Yeah,
so
and how beautiful to instead say the kid that can speak more than one language, the
yeah,
kid that
exactly.
learned.
Imagine that was the narrative.
Exactly.
Exactly. Imagine if that would have been the narrative. And I think
Yes.
that would have done wonders for a lot of immigrant kids, if that was the experience.
And
So
hopefully it can be like that, and I think that that's a lot of what we can find in Progressive Migrant in your account, which I want you to speak a little bit. Like, now we understand a little better why you wanted to take that path and why you now want to support other immigrants that are, I know you speak in your post to a lot of youth as well, so kind of like targeting that age and that
yeah,
moment where you feel,
yeah.
that you were transitioning as an immigrant. So tell us what we can find in your Instagram account and how can other immigrants feel, yeah, that support and that, yeah, not only support, but also the awareness that you raise in the
Feeling
topic.
validated, like
Yes.
feeling seen, like that was such an important thing. I feel like, we all kind of long for that, as children, even children that are non-immigrants. Like
True.
every kid just wants to feel seen and heard. And so when you now couple that with being an immigrant, and you know, the challenge becomes even more. It becomes greater. And so I started Progressive Migrant was something that was always, it was always bound to happen, but eventually I launched it back earlier this year, and I'm very grateful that I was able to get it out. And one of the things that I talk about is how that platform is not only speaking, it really speaks to me. Like I'm speaking through my experience, and I'm speaking to people that I know are out there. And I'm like, I want to reach you guys. I want to help you feel seen. I want to help you feel heard. I want to help validate your experience, because guess what? Your experience is very real. Like the fact that there is no representation and you don't feel seen or heard. And, I went through high school and middle school feeling like I was one of maybe two Nigerians in the whole school. And that was a very hard thing, like not having representation, not feeling heard or seen, and longing for connection, but not ever being able to have it, because you just felt like people couldn't connect or relate to your experience. So the page is really about being able to, one, amplify the immigrant voice, because there is millions of us, and we are so similar, and our experiences are so similar, but yet we're all unique and different in our own ways. But our experiences and our challenges are so similar. So I think the immigrant voice is one that, like, right now, I feel like a lot of what I've been hearing about immigrants is always based around their legal status. Are they documented? Are they undocumented? Are they a refugee? And that's what I think that's the narrative that I kept on hearing about immigrant. And I'm like, I'm an immigrant. And my experience was not based around my status as documented or undocumented. I had so many things as a kid that I was worried about. I was processing. I had so many challenges, but my legal status was not one of them.
Mhm.
And it just really killed me that like the narrative was always around immigrant was always being spinned around the legal status. But that's like just one of like the many challenges that we face.
Mm.
There are millions of immigrants that are undocumented, and I understand that's their experience. But you know what? That's not all of our experience. There's
Mhm.
so much more to our experience. And even the immigrant that is undocumented, they still have everyday challenges that is affecting their mental health. And they need people to speak to this. Progressive Migrants is all about that, being able to speak to experiences, that affect and impact the immigrant community every day, like in terms of our mental health. Talking from depression to how to communicate as an immigrant child with your immigrant parents, how to, understand boundaries with your immigrant parents, how to understand that the challenges that you're going through is not because there's something wrong with your native culture or from where you're from. It's not about there. That's not the problem.
Mm.
Part
Yes.
of the problem, and the problem is so layered, but like the issue is beyond where you're from.
Mm.
And I think with a lot of immigrant child, they tend to villainize the culture that they come from, and they feel like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
oh, the problem is this. If I wasn't from this country, if I was just born here, and if I was just all American, and it's like the idea of this all American is not even a real thing.
But
Everyone in this country has some sort of other background, and we all come from somewhere. Everyone was an immigrant, and
yeah,
so
that is
with the exception of Native Americans, like
yeah,
those are the only people that could really claim to be Americans,
right.
citizens. Like everyone else, we all sort of have different backgrounds, and so just empowering, especially the youth, like empowering them to see that your experience is very real
Mm.
and what you're experiencing is something that with time and with kindness, with patience, and with self-awareness, you can actually grow through your experience instead of allowing your experience to sort of be this one that it creates this negative impact on your life. It's something that you can use to create a positive impact.
As
So
strength. Yes.
absolutely.
I love
So
that. And I'm interested in hearing, I feel like I have been seeing so much stigma around the mental health approach and well, not the mental health approach. Everyone has mental health, but the seeking help or saying that you have an issue or
yeah.
saying that you're struggling, right? Like we all want to be strong and we don't want to, admit that we're struggling, but what are some of those things that you feel like immigration can have right in our mental health? How can immigration can impact our mental health to everyone, right? Like what are
Yeah.
some things that we can see that are changing, and yeah, and how can we start kind of dealing with those things?
Yeah, so there's always been such a stigma against mental health, and I don't know what people's got against mental
I know.
health, but I think it's just the idea that this is a an abstract um, aspect of your health, and so a lot of people, they don't understand the importance of it. And I'm very glad that society is slowly coming around to recognizing the importance of mental health. Mental health really is one of, if not the most important part of our health. When we talk about, our health and wellness, we're really talking about physical, mental, emotional. Like our health is way beyond our physical health. Like our brain is probably the most important organ in our body. And why do we act like our brain cannot use some help? This organ literally functions 24/7 without a break. And so what would it hurt to like provide some much needed support? for
Right.
our brain. Literally, if our whole world start with just a thought, with just an idea, and it's like if you start off the morning with the wrong thought, with the wrong, you
Mm.
know, with an unhealthy statement about yourself, about the world that you're in, it's already kind of starting your the snowball effect. And so I think it's very important that people understand the importance of mental health.
Yes.
But more importantly, like the immigration process has a huge impact on mental health. Huge impact. What we are going through, especially as children and even adults, like
Mhm.
what we are going through, what we are experiencing is a huge adjustment. And like there is such a thing as an adjustment disorder for a reason. Sometimes when you're going through something that's so significant and has such a huge impact on you, to the point where the immigration process can literally change the trajectory of your life, your personality, who you become. Like it really has that much of an impact,
Mhm.
you know. And so it plays an important role. And like I said, for a lot of immigrant children, transitioning is a difficult thing. Sometimes you will be experiencing symptoms of depression. Let's just call it what it is. Like sometimes you go through symptoms of what is depression. Sometimes there's like just missing home, just homesickness. Sometimes it's just not feeling supported in your community, not having a community that's supportive.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not being economically in the position that you would hope. You immigrated to this country for opportunities. What happens when those opportunities are not panning out exactly like you planned it? Safety. Like your safety is one of the most basic needs that human beings have. What if
Yeah.
you don't feel safe in the community that you're in? You're not able to find yourself in a nice neighborhood where you can afford really nice things. In the beginning, a lot of immigrants, we really have to start from the ground up.
Yeah.
You really have to build yourself from the ground up. And so you might find yourself in conditions or situations that are not necessarily safe. And so this is all having an impact on our mental health.
Yes.
And to say or to feel like our mental health is not suffering as a result of the immigration process will be a big lie, and we're doing ourselves a disfavor.
Yeah.
The immigration process plays a significant role on our mental health. But lucky for us, a lot of immigrants are super resilient. Immigrants are probably one of the most resilient bunch of people I have ever known. Like we are super resilient, but that doesn't mean that we're not struggling. You
Mm.
know, we shouldn't make, having strength and being resilient like our identity. Like, you know,
Yeah.
yes, we're resilient and that's fantastic, but we have feelings too. We have hurt and
Yes.
so
And that's so I love that you're talking about this. When I started the podcast, I started saying after meeting with so many amazing immigrants that once an immigrant, always resilient. Like I see that once
yeah,
you become an immigrant, it doesn't matter if you go back, it doesn't matter, like we carry this. But I always stress the fact that, as you're saying, one thing is to be resilient, and another thing is to think that then you you're stronger than others and nothing can affect you, because that's not what being resilient really is. But it gets confused very easily because I hear people telling me, well, but I'm not always strong, and I'm like, no, 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 that's not what I'm saying. But we do tend to say
yeah,
that to ourselves too, like I went through this horrible thing, this next thing is nothing for me, and we take away the value of, each phase of our life
yeah,
has some difficulty, and we shouldn't be comparing our journey with anyone else because maybe they're going through something difficult and our life seems easier.
yeah.
But hey, it's a struggle for you, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. All of our struggles are valid. Everything that we all go through individually is all very valid. And I think, we all deserve to have our issues, recognized. We all deserve to have our issues given the due. attention, the due care that is needed. A lot of the coping strategies that we use in being resilient, a lot of times are not even healthy. A
Right.
lot of times we have these unhealthy coping skills
Mm.
that we use to get us through challenging time and difficult times. But in actuality, these are not actually, I think I froze there for a second, but yeah, so in actuality, these are not actual um,
Healthy.
healthy ways of like being able to cope with situations. And so,
And it could be,
seeking help and learning healthier ways is
yeah.
extremely important.
And I want to like kind of touch on that because I think it's really important that you're talking about this. And I think sometimes we hear unhealthy skills, unhealthy coping skills, and we imagine like something really terrible, right? Like an extreme. But
Yeah,
what could be an unhealthy coping skill that you have seen, like
yeah,
very, common that we have all done, and how can we maybe replace it with a more healthy one? Just like
yeah.
an
So
example.
I think very easily, like burying our emotion is one. So this notion that I'm very strong and like I
Yes.
don't need help, or like just get through the year. And it's like it's
Yes.
hard to get through the year, but we
Totally.
use it like that's a coping thing of, oh, I'm just gonna get through the month. I'm just gonna get through the next month. Or like burying our emotions or burying symptoms of something that is obviously wrong, but you act like, okay, well, I'm not gonna get the help that I need, even if I reach out to someone. So I'm just going to just push through. So my feelings, my worries, I'm going to act like they're not there just so I can get through it. Like some immigrants, for example, they love going back home maybe every year or like maybe every 2 years, and they literally go through maybe a year or 6 months before their trip, just kind of like acting like whatever issues they have doesn't exist. And so they kind of just bury a lot of their issues and they just act like it doesn't exist.
Mm,
And what ends up happening is, they're constantly in a state of burnout. They're constantly in a state of burnout. So that's an unhealthy coping skill, like just
totally.
stuffing emotion and acting like our experiences is one that it doesn't impact us negatively because we're so focused on just making it through and
And
just
it's one, and I like that you mentioned that one because I think that's a coping skill that we have all used at some
yeah,
point, right?
yeah,
Even if
exactly. It's a
all
very
is
common
not good,
practice.
yes, it's
Yeah,
something that we're kind of like, yeah, guilty. I
yep,
did that, and if you did it, you know that it actually didn't work at the end. Like it maybe
yep,
got you through that month,
yeah,
but then you saw the results of not feeling well, of
yeah,
your physical health being impacted, everything, right? That we know.
yep.
So what could be like
And
a good starting point? Yeah, or the
so
opposite
I
of
was going to say another like really common like negative or like unhealthy coping skill is the whole I just got to be grateful. I'm
that.
in America. I'm having opportunities that people back home will kill for. I'm not allowed to complain. I cannot complain. I just have to push through. And it's like, okay, how long are you going to do that? And you're literally just miserable. You'll
Mm.
be miserable for months and months and months and years, all in the name of I should just be grateful. And because I have an opportunity here that other people back home would kill for. And so because of that, I'm not allowed to have a problem. I'm not allowed to call someone back home and tell them that I have a problem
Or complain.
or complain. I have to be the one that's the rock for everyone else back home.
Mm.
Listen, if you are listening right now and that's one of the things that you do to kind of help get you through the day and get you through the weeks and months, that is not, how you want to live your life. Just that mode of operation, it will have an impact on you. The residual sadness, the residual symptoms that you're kind of building up, it really will, it will eat at your mental state, and you're not going to be functioning at your best. You're not going to think and operate at your best. So
And
yeah,
you're gonna feel pretty alone too.
yep,
Because when we don't recognize our struggles and I'm very like pro, yeah, being grateful, but you're right. Like
if we never say, hey, this is terrible, I'm not
Yeah.
grateful for this right now, I wish my situation was different. I think if we don't do that, we don't get to connect with other people that are going through that too. Our friends, our family, we're not going to connect. They're going to see us like this person that's not struggling ever. They're doing great. So they don't need support. They don't need a word of validation. And you start to kind of, yeah, get away from the reality.
Yeah.
So
You do. You
it is
do.
really interesting.
You find yourself very easily, getting caught in like this slump, and like
Mm.
it just wears on you day in and day out. You notice it's harder and harder for you to get out of bed. It's harder and harder for you to fight the negativity away, because you're kind of eating away at your gratitude, and now
Yeah.
you're empty. You're emptied
Harder to,
out.
yeah, it's harder to ask for help too,
Yep.
right? If you're, yeah, to recognize that you need help, you need to also recognize that you're, having some difficulties.
Absolutely.
How can the listeners and anyone that maybe exploring, some challenges, they want to reach out for help, um, I where can they start the process of, would you recommend going to a therapist, searching mental health services in their area,
Yeah.
or would you recommend another first step for that process?
I think there's a lot of work that they can do for themselves,
Mhm.
but obviously, I do feel like therapy is a really good thing. But I understand therapy can also be expensive if
Yeah.
you don't have insurance coverage, and if you don't have resources that will provide discounted or um, prorated services. So
Mhm.
um, I would always recommend, in order for people to feel heard, seen, validated, and to feel at their best, it
Mhm.
always helps to have a community around you.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that living in an individualistic society does is that it creates um, this world where it's kind of like all I need is me. But really, you know, we all we long for connection. We thrive with having a community. We thrive having connection. So one of the first things that I would recommend is to try to have a community. Try to have a support group, a support network of people that you can confide in, people that you can trust to give you genuine, honest feedback. And if you're not in a position to do so because you're absolutely alone where you're at, or maybe people that are around you, they just cannot relate to your experience, I would definitely recommend you getting help. So reach out for some therapy. And I'm a therapist, and therapists are not, therapy is not this like something has to be all the way broken before you can go. Therapy is something that it really is just a form of support, and it can even help keep you afloat until you're ready to dive even deeper. You don't
Yes.
go into therapy and we're just like, oh, we can't wait to start diving into like your injuries and your wounds. Like, we want to help you feel supported first and help you get to that place where you are comfortable enough to actually discuss some of these things that may be a little more hurtful and a little more painful for you. So
Mhm.
just try to find you a therapist that is multicultural or multiculturally trained,
Mhm.
and they are able to serve the immigrant population, because they have a um, a heightened sense of awareness for multicultural and diverse background.
That is a great advice. That is a great tip, like to focus on finding someone that, can connect with you in a level, of
Yeah,
course, in their
absolutely.
training and in their experience. So, um, before we say goodbye, I want to talk about something that I have found really helpful from your account, and those are the affirmation words that you give, that daily affirmation. And I know this is not a replacement from seeking professional help, but
Yep.
I do find them really helpful, and I know they have an impact in our brain and in the way we behave. So I would love to hear from you. What's the impact of affirmations, and how can that be something we add to our daily routine that could help it?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Vera. Like I feel like it really does start with the
Yes.
simple things. Simple things like having affirmations in the morning. When you wake up, before you do anything else, what kind of thoughts, your thoughts, is literally what guides, how it really projects how the rest of your day is going to go. So I'm so glad you brought that up because I'm a huge fan of that. Like when we
Yes.
wake up in the morning, we really need to start telling ourselves things that helps to validate who we are as a person,
Mm.
what values, what ideals, our strength. Um, you know, we need to be saying things to ourselves that helps us to feel motivated to take on the day, that helps us to feel equipped to take on the day, that helps us to feel seen, heard. Because guess what? Self-love is always the best love.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
gotta start on ourselves.
I love
Uh,
that. When it's awesome. Yes.
so yeah, like
Self.
self-affirmation statements,
Yes.
very important. And there are just so many. And I even did a post where I was trying to just give people some guidance on like how to even create individual ones that is specific for them.
Right.
Because
Great.
like I said, it really is about just validating yourself,
Mm.
like affirming what you know about yourself. I have such and such skills. I am going to, make the most of today. I have everything I need to make
Mm.
today a great day. I can do this. I have the ability to get through the day. I have the skills to be able to conquer this challenge in front of me. Um, and it's just those little things. And you do. So you have to believe it. And the more affirmation we keep reminding ourselves and telling ourselves, the more we build up this positive mindset, this positive psychology, and it allows us to actually believe in our own strength. And then guess what? We can conquer and we can actually do it because we believed in ourselves before anyone else did. And so it's very important that, when you wake up, try to remind yourself of how awesome you are, how great you are, and the skills that you possess, and, even things that you're not necessarily good at. You can tell yourself, you know, I'm not very good at this, but I am getting better every day. And I am mastering this. I will master this. I will get good at this. And that's it.
And believe it. Yes.
Yeah. And just keep reminding yourself. And you, every morning, say kind things to yourself
Yes.
because that's what you start your day off with. And imagine starting your day off feeling energized and feeling that positive energy as opposed to just kind of dreading and just carrying. And yeah,
Yeah.
so
And
yeah.
it's just, yeah, thank you so much for talking about that, because that's something that I'm trying to practice. And that's something that it's funny, like we tell ourselves so many terrible things throughout that,
We do.
just try telling one thing that's good at the beginning
Yeah.
and see how that, you know, can change your whole day. So I really appreciate you talking about this and talking about how can we start seeking help and finding support. And I want us to share where can we connect with you and find your page, and where can people, talk to
Okay.
you.
Yeah. So for everyone listening, if you guys would like to connect with me, be sure to check out Progressive Migrants. That is Progressive Migrants. It's on Instagram. I do have a YouTube account as well. However, my YouTube account has not been launched yet.
So we need to
So
stay tuned. Yes.
yes, you guys definitely need to stay tuned for that, and just follow the Instagram account and help spread the words. Like
Yes.
it is extremely important that we have our voices heard.
Mm.
If we come together and we all share our experiences, guess what? The world will listen. We are so much more than our legal status. We are so much more than refugees. We're so much more than undocumented immigrants. We're so much more than they steal our jobs. our experience is so much greater than that. We have so many stories to tell. Let's come together. Let's share our story. Let's, support each other, and we'll get there. So
We truly are stronger together. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Can't wait to stay connected with you.
thank you for having me, Vero. I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you so much for tuning in and for listening. I'll see you next week. Don't forget to subscribe. Adios.